End of story. You don't have to go any further than this. And I think, what we saw today bore that out. The video that they showed today was really powerful stuff. And I don't know how you're not swayed by seeing these angry marauders running through the halls of our legislative house looking for people to murder. I mean, they were this close. Well, as I think it was Eric Swalwell who said it. I think was it 58 steps? There were 58 steps away from grabbing Mitt Romney. That is frightening. Now, I'll tell you, I think the House managers have done a really good job, led by Jamie Raskin. They laid out a clear, compelling case that Donald Trump did, in fact, incite the insurrection. They went through meticulously. And look, they went through meticulously, step by step. The reality is it's inarguable that this is the most grievous constitutional crime ever committed by a president. What Donald Trump has done is historic in proportions and will be looked at for generations to come. How we handle this moment, generations will look back and examine. Were we right? Were we wrong? And the question is, which side of history do you want to be on? As I watched the House managers lay out the case that Trump riled up the crowd, got them all, fired up. We're gonna fight, and we're gonna, make our voices heard, and we're gonna blah blah blah, and whipped them into a frenzy. We're gonna go down there, and we're going to, we're gonna do something. Because if we don't, we won't have a country left, he said. There'll be nothing left. He pointed him directly at Congress. He said, I'm going to go with you. Where the hell was he? That's what I want to know. Where'd he go? He didn't do anything. He stepped back. He let the attack happen. He wired them up. He fired them up. He whipped them up. And he directed him right at Congress. Go get him. Sig him. And according to Ben Sass, was delighted that they were fighting for him. And then he did nothing to stop the attack. And for that, he must be held accountable. Now, the one thing that I will disagree with the prosecutors, the impeachment management team, is that they kept saying that this is, since the election. And look, I know they want to keep it simple. I know that they want to, focus the field on all of the things he said around election time and thereafter, that, he was preparing it. He was, getting his base all whipped up to, go defend him. But I would argue that this started really in 2015. This started, back during the last election when, everybody thought, I shouldn't say everybody, I didn't. I predicted he was going to win. But most pundits thought that he was going to lose. And he was laying the groundwork for him to be able to save face by saying it was stolen from him. He was already laying that groundwork in 2015. And I was talking about it back then, that this is going to be a serious problem, because there's already momentum behind this idea that there's no way Donald Trump could possibly lose, and if he does lose, it's all been stolen. And they've been playing those themes for the last several years. This isn't new. So this election season comes around, and all the polling has him down. His internals are bad. In fact, the people who wrote the autopsy of his electoral loss, didn't even mention anything close to election fraud or any voter irregularities. It talked about him. The pandemic was a big part of his loss, and the fact that he was really a crummy president. Bad things happened. But I look at this and I go, he's been laying this groundwork for a while because, everything he does is the best. It's the greatest. It's the most wonderful ever. So one, in his mind, you go, well, he really didn't believe he could lose. And, that's a justification. It's not. This man whipped these people into a frenzy, brought them to the Capitol. And you heard the voices of the people who were there saying they knew what they were going there for. There were groups that had trained to do just what happened. They went there with a mission, a well thought out, well planned, highly trained, highly skilled, well executed mission. And they almost succeeded. They almost got 53 steps. They almost got there. And you look at this and you just go, wow, how close we were to this kind of horrible thing. Now, look, I'm of the mindset that he needs to be held accountable. I've been saying this for the longest time. I wasn't wholly impressed with the first impeachment. I said, if we're going to do it, you got to go through, you got to do it. But there was no way that the Republicans were ever going to convict. So I was like, yeah, okay, we're going to go through it, but there's never going to be a conviction. He's inevitably going to be not held accountable. History will remember him as someone who was impeached, but he's not going to be held accountable. And the Republicans proved everybody right and not. Only Mitt Romney. We now have this situation where 6 Republicans have moved over and said, no, this is kind of constitutional. We want to hear more. And I think those 6 are saying, look, we want somebody accountable too. Because one of the things that Raskin and the rest of the House management folks are pointing out is you don't just get to be president for all of the months up until the last one. You're president that last month, and you should be accountable that last month. For me, this is much bigger than just, and I talked about this yesterday, this is much bigger than just holding Donald Trump accountable. I worry about the next Donald Trump. I kind of agree with Lisa Murkowski. I don't see a way Trump wins another election ever. I don't see it. Especially given what happened on January 6th. Will he have his strong 40%? Yes. But I don't think he gets above that. I don't think you get, at least I hope I'm wrong. I hope this is true. I hope that you don't see Republicans flocking back to him. But this is one of those moments where you go, do we really want to set a precedent that in the future a president can whip people into this kind of a frenzy, point them back at Congress again and put us in this kind of a situation again? Now they're saying we're going to build fences around the Capitol, which I think is just a horrible, horrible thing. And look, we used to be, a free and open country. And every day, because of the people who say they love freedom, more and more because of them, we're closing our country down because the country's afraid of them. And it's weird to me that the people who talk about freedom and talk about liberty and talk about being these tough people, they feel the need to always have a gun. It's really, really quite twisted. And I had someone say to me, well, this is just all political. You never liked Donald Trump. And you're right, I never liked Trump. But if this were Obama or anybody else, I would be going to do the same thing. This isn't about politics. This is about right or wrong. And the unity I think that's going to come out of this isn't going to be Democrat or Republican. It's going to be American. It's going to be proud, patriotic Americans. And it's going to be traitors. If you look at what's going on, if you look at those videos today and you go, no big deal. I want nothing to do with you. You are not, in my view, an American. And you look at the Josh Hawleys of the world. You look at the James Inhofes of the world. In fact, James Inhofe, the Republican from Oklahoma, sat through all of the evidence. Democrats laid out meticulously. He said, I don't think there's anything that's been said by either side that has changed any votes. There's nothing that I've heard during this process that I hadn't already heard. His mind is closed. His mind is made up. he's not going to move to convict. Josh Hawley, whose feet were up on the desk today, caught everyone's attention because he wasn't even paying attention. He said, "There's nothing new here for me at the end of the day. I think we don't have jurisdiction as a court in order to pursue this, so nothing that I've seen changes my view on that. And if you don't have jurisdiction, that's just the end of the call." So for him, it's purely technical. I don't care what I've heard. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to me. That's my excuse. Case over, Lindsey Graham said. Case over. Lindsey Graham actually reassured Donald Trump that you're going to be fine. You'll be back to grabbing her by you know what before you know it. And I'll be honest, the more I look at the statements from these folks, the scarier for me the things become. Because if Trump isn't held accountable here, what happens in a couple years if someone like Josh Hawley runs and he takes the mantle from Donald Trump and is somehow able to have a personality transplant to where he's actually somewhat charismatic and can actually do a quarter of what Trump's able to do? Let's just say in fantasy land that Josh Hawley becomes someone gives a rat's behind about. He is going to go into office knowing that no one's going to hold him accountable. And all he's got to do is play the political numbers. And this is where I've said for a very long time, it was always going to be the Republicans who saved the Republic. It was always going to be the Mitch McConnells who are going to have to save this country. And there's still talk. Look, there's still talk. Mitch McConnell is, I think he's more toying with people than actually considering. But he's thrown it out there that he's people should vote their conscience. Does that mean he's going to? I doubt it, because of course his finger's in the wind. But the fact that the Republicans haven't is frightening. And I actually know a couple of Republicans who are saying, "Look, that was a bridge too far. We can't have that. We can't have a president who, like Richard Nixon said, if the president does it, then it's not illegal." Donald Trump has just proven that. If he gets away with this, he's just proven it. Now, some will say, "But Rick, this should be done in the court of law. This shouldn't be done in the Senate. It should be done in the court of law." And there's some argument to that. I'm of the mindset you can do both. Our government has to have a way to cleanse itself, has to have a way to hold itself accountable. Impeachment is one of those tools that the founders gave our country, our leadership, our government, to purge itself of the bad, of the evil, of the wrong. Sadly, though, I think just the Inhoffs and the Hawleys and the Cruzes and the Grahams, there's no courage there. There's no one going to step forward and find a spine. The chances of any of them finding a spine is equally as likely as Josh Hawley finding a personality. It is not going to happen. But I'll tell you, if you are watching these clips, they're scary as hell. And if you do love the flag that people claim and they wear as capes and drape all over the place, if you do, are you paying attention to how close it came? How close it came to falling? How close we came to being overthrown from within? Frightening. Frighteningly close. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1973. That was the day the worst industrial disaster in Staten Island took place. Staten Island housed the world's largest liquefied natural gas storage tank. The Texas Eastern Transmission Corporation owned the tank and operated a pipeline system that stretched from Texas to the East Coast. The tank measured 272 feet across and was as tall as an 11-story building. When leaks were suspected, the company had the tank emptied and shut down. Workers had been repairing the torn mylar insulation in the tank's liner for months. But then, vapors released during the repair process ignited the lining. This created extreme temperature and caused the pressure to rise, which resulted in an explosion inside the tank. The entire 6-inch thick concrete dome covering the tank immediately crumbled and rained down on the workers inside. 40 workers and 3 safety inspectors were inside at the time. None of them survived. The explosion caused a massive crater. Smoke billowed out for over 5 hours. Investigations revealed that nitrogen, Freon 11, and oxygen, and not liquefied gas, fueled the explosion. The cause was never determined. Some 25 years later, the New York Planning Board began reevaluating a moratorium on liquefied natural gas facilities in place since 1978. They concluded that government regulations and industry operating practices now in place would prevent a replication of this accident. The fire involved combustible construction materials and a tank design that are now prohibited. Although the exact causes may never be known, it is certain that liquefied natural gas was not involved in the accident, and the surrounding areas outside the facilities were not exposed to risk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, I'm still stuck watching those videos, especially the one with Mitt Romney just turning and hightailing back the other way. I think like Swalwell said, was it 53 steps, 58 steps away from having a U.S. senator being captured by these people? It's just remarkable. And look, I had a whole show planned, obviously, on other topics, and we're going to get to those. But the impeachment front and foremost. So I'm gonna ask my next guest some thoughts on that, and then we're gonna get into the labor stuff that I wanted to get into. That's why I've asked Shaun Richman to come talk with us. He's the program director at the SUNY College Empire Center for Labor Studies. He's one of the really good folks in labor. Shaun, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So
it's the
let's
Harry
start
Van Arsdale Jr. School of Labor Studies.
Uh-oh.
At SUNY Empire State College. It's a lot of words, but they all matter.
It is. It was all a lot of words, and that's what I had. Just like the impeachment, the guy yesterday said it's a lot of words. The Constitution's a lot of words, and then went on to some bizarre rambling. But before, let's get into real quick. Have you been following this?
I mean, I saw the video they cut, and it's. I mean, there's no horror movie that could really compete with it, and we all know that like most of the Republican senators are inclined to vote to acquit, because they're terrified, and it's like, are they terrified of like getting voted out? And actually, I think a lot of them are terrified of like these people tried to murder them, and they will come back and try to murder them again. And their best strategy here seems to be like, let's just vamp for time. Let's just like tap dance, and like they're not dealing with the issue that they have created, which is that there are people that are like ready to just murder their governmental representatives, murder their neighbors. Like, we have unleashed a real monster here. Trump has unleashed a monster. 40 years of Nixon and Reagan republicanism has unleashed a monster, and it's out of control.
No, and look, I don't give Trump all the credit. This is who the Republican Party has been for a very long time. He was just the one who brought it out and was in the moment when all of the organizing came out. Exactly. He's the one who lifted it all up and exposed it. I mean, back in '92, I was joking, like a lot of people were, that Buchanan's speeches were better in their original German. It wasn't a shock back then either. But
And what an intellectual he was compared to.
exactly. And for me, this moment is about the next president. For someone like Josh Hawley who wants to be president, and if you ever found any personality, who knows, maybe it's about holding him accountable down the road for me.
Yeah, or Tom Cotton is also, I think,
Yeah, jeez. There's another one.
Yeah.
I do want to, since I got that, I do now want to talk a little bit about, for me, a lot of how we got to this moment is the fact that, we've had, 40 years of deindustrialization. We've had, declining labor union density that's caused wages to decline over the last 40 years. In fact, the Rand Corporation did a study that over the last 45 years we've had something like $100 trillion in wealth stolen from the working class of this country and divided and redistributed upwards. The conditions are such that the kind of anger that we see is fairly predictable. One of the things that I had hoped that Joe Biden is going to do is help try and turn some of that around. So for me, on day one, him firing Peter Robb was a huge step in the right direction in my view. But I wanted to get some of your thoughts on Biden's plan and what we need to do to answer some of those labor questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit frustrated by Biden is like playing his cards really close to his chest. So like we're doing a lot of tea reading, right? Like and in a lot of ways it's a throwback to 1933. Roosevelt was really vague about what he was going to do. Oh, it's a New Deal. Okay, great, that can mean anything. And Biden has been similar. I do think that Biden is a real change in any Democratic president that we've had in our lifetimes, Carter plus, in that I think that he recognizes that that Trump won because of the decline of unions, right? And just like, Trump won the state of Michigan in the year 2016 by about 10,000 votes, with fewer votes than Romney got 4 years prior. And, for Mr. Carr Elevator, Michigan is as close as he comes to a home state.
Right.
Right. And there's a lot of things you could chalk up to like why the Democrats lost Michigan in 2016, but is right to work a part of it? I mean, probably it's worth 10,000 votes at least. So I think that Joe Biden is like, it comes in unlike any other Democratic president in our lifetimes, recognizing that he has to grow the labor movement by as many million new members as he can in the next 2 years. He's got 2 years before the midterms, before he's locked out and he can't get any more of his agenda through. So that is encouraging. My greatest fear in all of this, and the reason that I wrote my book, was that I don't think that the labor left, labor intellectuals have really grappled enough with like, well, how the hell do we revive the labor movement? And so the PRO Act, which really might pass through reconciliation, or if they get rid of the filibuster, we're off to the races. But the drafting process of the PRO Act was a lot of sort of like, sure, yeah, fine, throw that in, whatever, this thing's never going to pass. It wasn't like sort of consciously structured as like, okay, how do we win?
Right.
And that sort of terrifies me, because if like potentially the PRO Act is our only shot. If we got this 2-year window and all we're doing is passing things through reconciliation, this is it. We get the PRO Act, and then we somehow have to grow by 5 million union members. And, I could criticize the PRO Act. There's stuff that I think that's missing in there. I also just think that there's like strategic, there's just ways that union staffers, union leaders, union members even grapple with strategy where, we tend to deal with sort of received knowledge. We tend to sort of like, okay, so you did this before me 20 years ago, tell me how it's done. And it's like, the PRO Act passes, everything radically changes, and we got to change up our playbook really fast because we got to organize 5 million members in 2 years.
Right. No, that's an excellent point. I think where the right does this much better than the left is they have think tanks in every state
Well,
who
they have a lot more
they're
money than
paid
us. Yeah,
to figure this stuff out, to game this
correct.
stuff out constantly,
They play the
and
long
then
game.
they have a media structure that pounds it out constantly.
Right.
One of the reasons we started this show 16 years ago is to to have a place for working people to get some bit of information and have the discussions that we're having, because I'm thinking the same way. Okay, how do we get into these places to organize them? I've done organizing over the years. It's hard to get into places to even organize them. So how do you get over those obstacles, even if the law's on your side? And that's going to be a lot of work and a lot of how to.
It is, and I mean, so my biggest criticism with the PRO Act is that it didn't grapple enough with a Supreme Court and lower court precedent. The judges have messed up labor law way more than Taft-Hartley ever did.
Yeah.
And this law needs to say to the NLRB, ignore all that crap. The judges in their black robes can drop dead. I think another problem that we have is that the labor movement really like chews up and spits out organizers. And so a lot of the experience of the John Sweeney era, 1995 plus, organize or die, a lot of the people who like went through hell and learned a lot have moved on. They got kicked out. We got to figure out a way to bring those people back. Maybe not in their old roles. I don't want to return to full-time organizing, but I'm happy to be a mentor to organizers who are out there. And the organizing model, and I'm defining this as anything that's based off of Kate Bronfenbrenner's research. Kate Bronfenbrenner at Cornell came up with the 10 most effective strategies. She scientifically studied it. It's all sort of numerically sound, but the organizing models that were built off of that were predicated at a time in the 1980s and the early 1990s when it was like it's the boss's law. They get to do that. The politicians don't care. The Democrats don't care. The public doesn't care. And so a lot of it is about organizing in secret. And a lot of it, a lot of unions are making choices or have been making choices of we're not going to file that ULP because we're going to lose it, or, it's not, we don't have the finances to fund that ULP. And if the Democrats go through a scorched earth campaign to pass the PRO Act, either through reconciliation or by ending the filibuster, and I do think that's an actual possibility. If they do that, I don't think that enough Democratic decision makers, I don't think that enough reporters, although we've had a real organizing boom in print media, which is very helpful, because when you've gone through an organizing campaign, then you know how difficult it is.
Right.
But I think in general, there aren't enough people who will tell the story of the workers that are going to try to organize in the wake of the PRO Act, who understand just how tilted in favor of the bosses it is. And so I do think that union organizing strategists and workers and organizing committees, rank and file organizing committees, really need to grapple with, maybe we need to organize in public a lot more. Maybe we do need to file a ton of ULPs. Maybe when the National Labor Relations Act was not the first labor law of the New Deal. The first one was the Blue Eagle, the National Industrial Recovery Act, which had a simple sentence that said, the federal government is going to guarantee workers' right to organize. And bosses were still, they were putting, guards out with machine guns and gunning down strikers. But you had enough, you had senators, who were calling for hearings and were taking testimony and were revealing how that law wasn't enough, that it really is bad. They will murder workers who try to form a union. And that's why we need better protections. And that's how we got unfair labor practices and the National Labor Relations Act.
Right.
And so we're back to the future where that needs to be a part of the equation here. Like, let's organize, let's take some risks that workers are willing to take, and let's call attention to when the bosses do incredibly outrageous things, like Amazon is doing probably right now, right this minute. They're probably forcing a bunch of workers into a captive audience meeting.
No, absolutely. But, my argument has always been that you need community organizing. You need the community behind it, and understanding that unions are a good thing. Workers with bargaining rights get higher wages. It's better for the community. You go back to some of the organizing that happened, in the 30s and 40s, and immediately I'm thinking of the Autolite strike in Toledo, where the community was 100% behind it, and helped fundraise and feed the workers so that they could be out long enough to actually win something. And though most of the people were never going to be union members, I think you have to be able to take it to that level of organizing and that level of messaging. And again, my fear is, like you've pointed out, we're just not ready for that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I call organizing in public. I'll tell the story. So I used to run the American Federation of Teachers charter school organizing division. And I was very much in this mindset of like, organize in secret and surprise the boss with a 95% petition, march on the principal's office, demand union recognition, but keep it inside the four walls of the school building.
Right.
And the first charter school that we went for collective bargaining in New Orleans, where, after Katrina, they fired all the teachers, everything went charter. The first school that we organized was actually like one of the most prominent, potentially the highest performing high school in the state. Mayors went there, governors went there, senators went there. The congressman for New Orleans was on the school board. And we had a really good organizing committee. We had that 90% support. They marched on the principal and they demanded recognition. And the school board was like, well, let's have a hearing. Let's have a meeting and we can hear from our community, our parents, whatever. And like all of the media in New Orleans showed up for it. And it terrified me to have an organizing meeting live blogged on the Times-Picayune. And Wade Rathke from Acorn was there because he's an alum. It was an insane experience. But it was live blogged, and the teachers were a solid organizing committee, and they were solid in their messaging. And, the school board's like, wait, we don't understand. Why did this happen? And the teachers, just one by one in their testimony in this auditorium of 1,000 people, were like, this is why. And also just like, how did you not know? Why are you surprised by this? And again, live blogged. Yeah, so the entire city watched it. And as terrifying as it was in the moment, it was like incredibly empowering, not just for the teachers at Benjamin Franklin High School, but for the thousands of other teachers in the city of New Orleans who were watching that live blog. And that's what Autolite was in a certain extent, right? Like the people that were supporting Autolite weren't just supporting the workers at Autolite getting a union. They were like, you get a union, I get a union. We raise the wages for everybody. But like unions have not organized like that for a really long time.
And that's where we got to change our mindset.
Terrifying.
And that's where we got to change the mindset of people in this country, especially like you'll talk about pensions. You don't have, I don't have one, you shouldn't have one. This changes that mindset. I want what you've got. How do I get it?
You win it so I can get it.
Exactly. So the last question real quick is, do you see the Biden being up to that challenge?
I see encouraging signs. I mean, I'm frustrated by how much we're reading tea leaves. There's a very good story in the New York Times today, more around sort of the student debt issue, but like very much, Biden's people, like, unlike Obama's people, sort of like, yeah, go make that noise. Go embarrass us. Go, make us do it.
Absolutely. Something good. Again, we're pushing. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts as this continues, as we get to see what the tea leaves are. But Shaun, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Shaun. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That was the day that's known in Great Britain as the Battle of Saltley Gate. 30,000 Birmingham engineers had walked out in solidarity with a strike held by the National Union of Mine Workers. The miners were taking a stand against austerity pay. The Saltley Coking Works had become the epicenter in the national labor struggle. During the labor dispute, the miners' union and the government had agreed that coal would only go to priority customers like hospitals. But Saltley defied the agreement and kept their gates open. A long line of trucks formed to enter the depot. The workers knew that if Saltley continued to operate, it would undermine their strike. The call went out for a mass action to close the gates. Between 10 and 15,000 working people answered the call. The Evening Mail described the scene with a front-page story, writing, "Below trade union banners, a sea of faces stretched for as far as the eye could see. And there was a great roar as the gates shut for the first time since picketing began last week." Faced with such a crowd, security workers from the depot were forced to close the gate. The crowd erupted with a cheer. Arthur Scarhill, president of the Miners' Union, climbed onto a roof to address the crowd, declaring, "If working people are united, they can achieve anything." The victory was a turning point. A little over a week later, the government had agreed to a pay raise for the miners.
A solid wall are we, close the gates, close the gates. Our strength is unity, close the gates. We've marched across the years through hunger, doubt and fears. We are the engineers, close the gates, close the gates.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news coming out of the latest House Democrat COVID relief bill. They've actually included 15 weeks of paid leave for federal workers, for parents, for caregivers during this virus. And for me, this is that beginning step. And I've been talking about this for a while. Well, for decades now, since we had medical leave, it should have been paid medical leave. What good is it that you get time off if you can't afford to take the time off to care for a loved one or bring a new child into the world? If we truly believed in family values, this would have been one of the first places we should have gone. But good on them. Hopefully this gets through. Hopefully the Democrats don't lose a spine in the Senate and take all this stuff out. But we shall see. Some interesting news coming out from our good friends at the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. They've got some new data out talking about how affordable healthcare is in our great state of Pennsylvania during this pandemic. And here to share some thoughts on, the data that they've come across, what it means for us, I've asked Robin Stelly to come talk with us. Robin's an organizer with the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. Robin, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, fan.
So I'm looking at this. Let's start with the federal thing. I mean, the fact that paid sick time, paid family leave, I think is a really good thing.
Of course, as you mentioned, what good is getting time off if you're not going to pay to be able to do it? You can't afford to take it. Use it. Same thing with insurance. If you can't afford to use your insurance, you've got to be able to afford what you have.
Yeah. So walk me through this new data that you guys have come up with. I guess you and the Pennsylvania Health Access Network and Altrum, I guess. Altrum, am I saying that right?
Alterum's Healthcare Value Hub.
So what have you come across?
Well, we did, this is the second year in a row we've done a survey, polling, right? We call it a survey, of over 1,100 Pennsylvanians. The survey took place from the end of October to the middle of December, so that's right in COVID time. We were dealing with COVID, dealing with unemployment, dealing with a lot, and then we called them up and talked to them about healthcare affordability. What we found out is that Pennsylvania residents are critically concerned about healthcare They believe their elected officials should act to address these problems, and across party lines, they support widespread. There's widespread support across party lines for solutions. And what's significant about the solutions is that they see a role for government in them, which is, we saw this last year and we see it again this year.
Yeah, I mean the numbers are pretty staggering. Yeah, this is just one of those moments where uh, this, here's where I'm struggling. I see these horrible numbers that 1 in 2 Pennsylvanians are struggling to pay for health care in the last year. 3 in 4 are worried about affording the needs of health care in the future. I see all of this stuff, and it's angering and it's frustrating. Is there something we can be doing about it?
Absolutely. Well, and there's some really good news there, right? Like you mentioned about paid sick leave. So right now, Congress is working on the American Rescue Plan. I don't know if it's going to be called the American Rescue Plan when it's all done, but the COVID relief, the next COVID relief, right? So different committees are working on it. The Ways and Means Committee has included in their final product steps that will make the premiums on the exchanges, it used to be healthcare.gov in Pennsylvania, now it's penny.com. They're taking steps to make those. You can't hear me?
Yeah, we're going to give you a call. She's going to call the number.
I don't hear him. I don't hear him.
Oh, geez.
There you go. Now I hear you. Okay.
I just had a really crazy moment where I've done some really dumb stuff.
Join the club.
So, in looking at this, I got to ask the question, when you've got 3 in 5 Pennsylvanians worried about, affording treatment for COVID-19, how do we get them the care that they need?
There's only one way, right? They have to take action. They have to make sure that they tell their representatives that they need them to take steps in the right direction to drive down the cost of care and coverage. So, for instance, there's a bill last year, Medicare, it was H.R. 3 that allowed Medicare to negotiate for lower prices, right? That passed the House. Of course, it was DOA in the Senate. It needs to pass the House again. It needs to pass the Senate. We need to let seniors be able to have a life, where they don't have to wake up worried, are they going to be able to pay for their medicine? The person, Teresa from Delaware County, was one of the guests on our press conference earlier this week, and she takes great care of herself. She has type 2 diabetes. She exercises, she eats right, but there's only so much you can do with diet and exercise. She still has type 2 diabetes. She doesn't want to fall in the donut hole because it becomes unaffordable for her at that point. So she rations her medicine and makes 3 months of medicine last for 6 months. That's unacceptable. And she's a Medicare patient. So, Medicare has a real problem when it comes to affordability of medicine, and H.R. 3 addressed it. We need to make sure that bill passes the House, and this time the Senate gets to Biden's desk.
No,
you can.
No, you're right. We need to actually get some legislation passed. But I want to go back through this real quick because some of the numbers you guys found in this data that you've come out with the Philadelphia or with the Pennsylvania Health Access Network and this Alterum healthcare hub. 1 in 2 Pennsylvanians struggle to afford health care in the past year. 3 in 4 are worried about affordable health care in the future. 3 in 5 Pennsylvanians are worried that they can't afford the COVID treatment. You look at 7 in 10, according to the numbers you've got, said that health care was their top issue when talking to their representatives. This should alert our elected leaders that this is a dire situation. People want some action. So something should be moving forward, don't you think?
Absolutely. And when you talk about elected leaders, don't forget that this was cross-party lines. 90% of people we talked to, if they identified as conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, independent, no matter what, they said that there's a role for government to play in fixing this problem. What I found inspirational about the results was that Pennsylvanians said, yeah, we play a role in this. We can take generics if we need to. We can try diet and exercise. We can change our personal behaviors. They're willing to step up and take that step, be part of the solution. But they also, 93%, say that the government has to take steps to expand health insurance so that everyone can afford quality coverage. I mean, everyone can afford quality coverage. They're talking about universal coverage here. People aren't shy about that. Yeah. 93% want to make it easier to switch insurers if a health care plan drops your doctor. So if your insurance company fails you, they want to be able to switch plans. That's going to be a problem for insurance companies, but, the Pennsylvanians are saying, hey, why are we the ones bearing the brunt of this? Why are we the ones who have to make all the sacrifices? And they're right. And 92% want to know what a fair price would be for specific procedures. That's just price transparency. Again, they're willing to take on the burden of being an informed consumer and do that work, but how can they do the work if they don't know what prices are from place to place and if those are honest, appraisals?
Yeah, but I've heard that argument a bunch. And look, I on a certain level, I agree. We should be paying attention to what we're spending. But the reality is, if you're laying on the ground having a heart attack, you're not speed dialing who's got the coupon this week. You're like, get me to the place I need to get to as quick as possible. When my daughter fell off the parallel bars and broke her arm, I wasn't going, gee, who's got arms on sale this week? It was, how can I get her out of pain as quickly as possible and get her repaired and fixed and feeling better as fast as possible, because I was feeling horrible. Now she was too, but it was one of those things where I wasn't thinking about, gee, how much is this going to cost? I wasn't worried about, hey, this is going to break me. I was, hey, how do I get the pain to stop?
Well, the good news there is that on the federal level, surprise medical bill legislation did pass. Be aware, it will not take effect until next year. So all during this year, you could be the victim of a surprise medical bill, which means you take your daughter with the broken arm to the quote-unquote wrong hospital, or while she's in the quote-unquote right hospital, the in-network hospital, the radiologist who reads the x-ray is out of network, and boom, you get hit with a $3,000 bill to pay that radiologist. That can still happen to you for this year. But next year, that'll be illegal.
That's just something. That is just plain nuts. If you go into a hospital, and this is where I think a lot of people are surprised at how disjointed our healthcare system is, and how privatization has just destroyed what was once a very good system. You can go and have a procedure done and have multiple different companies billing you from every different direction. I had a hip replaced a year ago, and I was amazed. Now, granted, I have union health care. I've got the best health care money can buy because my union negotiates for it and does an incredible job for it. Thank you, Teamsters Union. But, I'm seeing these bills coming in from all of these different places, and I'm going, I went to one doctor in one hospital. How is this possible?
Yep. And I don't know if you received a surprise bill. You may have. A lot of times surprise bills are, again, I'm going to say quote unquote small. Maybe they're $60, $80. Maybe you just feel like, well, I guess that's just another bill. And it turns out that you're being billed because you were out of network. The doctor who treated you was out of network, and you had no way of knowing.
Yeah, our insurance, I got to be honest, is fabulous. There's almost nothing that's out of network, and I don't get hit with out of network fees either. One of the only insurance plans in the country left that doesn't basically murder you for going to someone that they don't approve of. Again, thank you to my Teamsters Union for negotiating that. But for me, when I think about insurance, I think about what I've had through my work life, and I've been very fortunate. I realize that because for my hip surgery, it cost me $130 out of pocket. That's it.
Wow.
And look,
wow.
I'm one of those people who goes, I've got really good insurance. Robin, I want you to have the same thing. I want you to have the same security that I have. I want our listeners to have the same kind of health security that I've been accustomed to my whole life. I want us all to do better. And I think we can, given the amount of money that we spend on healthcare, the amount of money we put into CEOs' pockets and into drug companies' pockets and into investors' pockets, we could easily give every person in this country the kind of health insurance that I get.
Sure. Well, you're not going to get an argument from us on that.
I had to get that out there. I think because I think it's important. I think it's important that this frame that we've had in this country of, well, I don't have that, you shouldn't have it, is insane. I'm one of these people who go, hey, I've got it. I want you to have it too. I want us all to do better, because guess what happens? We all do better when we all do better. So we should be getting to that point. And the thing is, as you've pointed out, and your data lays this out, that 9 out of 10, I saw that number and I had to stop, because I don't know that you could get 9 out of 10 people to say water is wet. And yet you got 9 out of 10 people that say we need to have a government solution to address affordable health care. That, to me, is remarkable.
The government needs to have a role. They need to take a role. They need to, tell the insurance companies what to do, tell the pharmaceutical companies what to do. Laws need to be passed. That's right. That's exactly true.
Now we can argue about what that should look like. There are people like me who think that we should have one giant insurance pool that everybody is in, and that everyone gets the same coverage. You want to buy something above and beyond that, God bless you, you can do that. But everyone should have a basic minimum care, that if they fall and the kids break a leg or they need a hip replacement, that they're not going to be bankrupt on the other side.
Right.
I think in the richest country in the history of the world at its wealthiest moment, that's the least that we should be asking for.
And while we're working toward that, it is good to take these steps to make what exists now affordable for people. We want to make the Affordable Care Act more affordable for people. And like I said, it's encouraging that Ways and Means is looking at doing that, possibly in this next COVID relief bill. So now it would only last for as long as the COVID emergency. I think it's 2 years is what they've suggested. But just that proof of concept that we can make the Affordable Care Act more affordable for people, bring more people into coverage that they can afford to use, that would be a good thing.
That would be a good thing. Now, I understand, and I'm not sure where you guys are at on this. I know you guys are doing some incredible work signing people up for the Affordable Care Act, for the dreaded Obamacare. And I understand, President Obama has extended the window or is reopening the window or doing something around getting people to be able to sign up, because the last administration had done really, a horrible job of informing people that it was possible. Do you have any details around that opening?
Yep. So, right. President Biden said we've got to open up the healthcare.gov. He's in charge of healthcare.gov. Pennsylvania doesn't use healthcare.gov anymore. Pennsylvania uses Penny, PENNIE.com. Luckily, Governor Wolf is going to open up our exchange, our state-based exchange, from February 15th to May 15th, and anybody who needs insurance can shop around at penny.com and see if there's a plan there that they can afford, that they want to use and they can afford. And let me just tell people our helpline number, because call our helpline. You'll talk to our navigators. They're the best in the state, and they can help you figure it out at penny.com. And the number is 877-570-3642. Call that number, talk to a navigator, and see what's available. Maybe you qualify for Medicaid. You're not going to know until you find out.
No, and we'll make sure we get that number out on social media. And the website, again, was PENNIE.org?
.com.
Okay.
Yeah, it surprised me too, but it's PENN, Penn Insurance Exchange, IE.com. That's why it's Penny.
See, I was thinking of the penny on the ground, only misspelled, and now you've explained it. And that's even much better than what I was thinking. Because look, we are in this moment. We are in the moment where people are hurting. The economy's not doing well. People need to get coverage so in case something happens. And more importantly, going back to this number, three out of 5 people are worried that they're not going to be able to afford the treatment for COVID-19.
Rightly so. In a hospital for 2 weeks, maybe on a ventilator. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. You've got to get covered. You got to have insurance you can use. So. Yeah,
and I gotta think that the federal government's got to step in and help with some of that somehow.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're doing what they can. They're helping as far as the exchanges go, as far as insurance bought through the Affordable Care Act, because that's what the federal government can control easily, right away. And that's what the Ways and Means Committee is suggesting we do. Make it more affordable to buy in.
No,
Make
and
those payments.
And this is one of the knocks against the Affordable Care Act, and is that the premiums are too high. And yet I've known people who've been on it in this state, and they tell me that Pennsylvania does a really good job of making it accessible and in a lot of cases very affordable.
Yep, absolutely. For some people, it's a lifesaver, hands down. For other people who are up around that 400% of poverty, which doesn't make them millionaires, they have to pay full freight on their premiums, and that's a burden. And we have talked to people who have chosen to go uninsured because they simply can't afford that full freight once they hit that 400% of poverty, and they lose access to the subsidies.
Yeah, no one should have to. And this is one of those things where I still come back to, we need to have one giant insurance pool. Everybody in, everyone paying the same premiums. And if for low income people, we adjust that. But if we did that, we were able to lower the premiums and take all of the obscene profits out of it, I think we would be much better off. But we'll see where it plays out. But Robin, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Thanks for dealing through the technical difficulties. I appreciate it.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you very much.
Things happen. I appreciate it. But we'll make sure we get folks out to check out the penny.com website, PENNIE, Penn. InsuranceExchange.com, not org. We'll get that out on social media. Let's take a quick break right here. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
The renowned Western swing band leader Bob Wills would joyously call out in mid-song, "Take it away, Leon," bringing on a crowd-pleasing instrumental solo by steel guitar maestro Leon McAuliffe. But now comes another Leon who's such an off-key, screechy Wall Street billionaire that crowds are shouting, "Go away, Leon." He is hedge fund huckster Leon Cooperman, who first gained public notoriety when he compared Barack Obama's election to Hitler's rise to power, and he later was dubbed Crybaby Cooperman after he got all teary-eyed during a TV interview in which he decried the vilification of billionaires. The sad rich man was weeping about Senator Elizabeth Warren's proposal to make the uber-rich pay a modest surtax on the excessive fortunes of money manipulators like him. For a while, Leon did go away. But this January, the whiner was back on TV, blaming stock market gyrations on manipulations by people, quote, sitting at home getting their pandemic checks from the government. Then he plunged again into deep self-pity, deploring the likelihood that Biden will join Senator Warren's call for the rich to pay their fair share of taxes. "This fair share is a bullshit concept," he wailed. "It's just a way of attacking wealthy people." Then he appealed to the real victims of the pandemic to rally behind billionaires like him. "We make the world, quote, a substantially better place with our donations to charity," he asserted, pleading for public gratitude and exclaiming, "We all got to work together." This is Jim Hightower saying, "Together? While working class and poor people have been knocked down, cut off, and stomped on in the past year, America's 651 billionaires, including Cooperman, have collectively jacked up their wealth by $1 trillion, an average of $1.5 billion each."
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some new research out from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. What they've found is if you wear a mask that fits well, one that's fitted for your face, it actually decreases the chance of being exposed to infectious diseases and infectious aerosols by as much as 95%. And I go back to something we talked about last week with Dr. Nichols, who said, for the first time in his years as being a doctor, he hasn't gotten the flu because he wears the mask every day. And he says he's probably going to do it for the rest of his career to save himself from getting sick. Interesting. But evidently this is the first time that we now have CDC experts saying you should probably wear double masks. So imagine this. Think about how much trouble we have getting people to wear a single freaking mask. Imagine how crazy they're going to be when you say, no, I'm sorry, that one won't be enough. Oh, the fun. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, can we reopen our schools? Should we reopen our schools? Is it possible to open the schools, swing the doors open, and bring in the children? Here to share some thoughts on, should we be doing that? I've asked Mike Klonsky to come talk with us. Mike's an education blogger and a good friend from the Badass Teachers Association. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm now thinking, do I need a second mask now? Will one not going to be enough anymore?
No, it's better to layer up, I hear, and that's what I'm doing. I also got my second shot this week, so I'm feeling pretty confident. 2 masks, 2 shots, and I'm ready to get out there and get back to work.
Sounds like a George Thorogood song. All you need's a beer.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. I mean, because now you got the two shots. You're supposedly golden. Still gonna wear the mask?
Well, I don't really believe that because there's a lot of the virus is changing on us,
right?
And so I'm still I'm happy to get the shots, and but I'm still being cautious, still taking precautions. I'm not. I'm still social distancing. I'm still trying to be aware of my surroundings and like I said, masking up.
Very, very prudent, I would argue, and something I think that everyone should do. Because look, it's just common sense. Do those things that are going to keep you safe. I'm not talking about people should just hole up in their little hovel and
right.
not enter and not do anything else, but do the smart things. Like you said, wear the mask, stay the hell away from each other, wash your hands occasionally. That doesn't seem all that hard.
No, and because the other side of that is we have to take care of our mental health too, and make sure we're not holed up and isolated so much that we end up suffering from depression and things like that. I hear that's a big problem now. A lot of suicides, and I noticed that there's a lot of craziness out there, road rage and things like that. And I think
people trying to overthrow the Capitol.
Yeah, I don't know if you could pin that one on the pandemic. Well, maybe so, but I think it's complicated, of course, by the fact that we have this. I've had this 4 years of madness in the White House, fascist in the White House, and whipping up hysteria, misinformation, and charging people, getting people riled up and ready to overthrow democracy in the country. And there's always been a base for that here, unfortunately, going back a long ways. So.
No, it's crazy. And, I know we're going to talk about education and reopening schools, but have you been paying attention to what's been going on with these hearings?
I've been trying to keep up on it. Yeah, it's just all I can conclude is that Trump is obviously guilty as charged and that he'll obviously be acquitted because he's being his jury is his co-conspirators.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the case against him is it seems pretty airtight, and it's this new videos I'm seeing, about what happened are they're jarring. So the guy, you have a criminal who was in the White House, and I think they're trying their best to expose it through this impeachment hearings. But I think the real solution's got to be in criminal courts in the states. And I hope that's what takes place, and not just with him, but with his co-conspirators as well.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the arguments that his defense team was making. Like, this isn't the right jurisdiction. You should be trying him in a criminal court. And because when they were making that argument, that's not exactly what they said. But they said, this isn't the jurisdiction. This is, I'm like, yeah, this should be a criminal court. We should be going old school on this. The Constitution is very clear on what happens to people who, engage in treason.
Yeah, and I think they may not be able to get him on treason, but I see that Georgia, for example, is opening up criminal investigations on him for trying to rig the elections down there, and I'm sure in New York they can get him on financial thing. Hey, remember they got Al Capone
tax evasion
on tax evasion, and I'm sure they can get them on whatever they can get them on, but I think they should pursue it. And what I worry about is that the current administration is fearful of riling up his base if they go after him. And I don't think they should be fearful. I think, the elections gave him a mandate, to not just to get the White House, but to deal with Trumpism, which is still, still with us and will be for quite a while.
Yeah, it's scary stuff, and I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful, but I'm hopeful that the Republicans see this and do convict. I don't believe they're going to, because I think, as you accurately pointed out, most of them are co-conspirators. Most of them have been riling up with the same rhetoric and the same kind of heated insanity, and they're just as guilty.
And they've got to get elected. They've got to get elected in their red base areas. You know. Yeah.
Although I do wonder, had that crowd got a hold of one of them, if they would be still sitting on the same position.
Well, they were screaming to Lynch Pence, right?
Yeah, well, and again, that comes back to Trump, doesn't it?
Yes.
On the Monday before, he was talking about Pence in Georgia. You do what we want you to do, or I'm not going to like you so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody's safe out there, and but there's no courage. There's no courage in this Republican Party. There's no there's only a handful of people who are willing to do the right thing.
Boy, if that isn't true. I wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on in Chicago. I see that they just voted and approved a tentative safety policy that's going to allow Chicago's the third largest school district in the system in the entire country. They're going to begin opening up classes, resuming in school classes.
That's right.
But I think what they're doing kind of like a hybrid thing, right?
Yeah, they're doing a hybrid thing, and they're doing it as a step-by-step roll-in. First with the younger kids with kindergarten and early childhood classes, and they've been doing. They've already opened things up for special ed, what they call special ed, and things like that. And so they're going to be rolling it in gradually as teachers get vaccinated, and kind of a step-by-step thing, which I think is the right thing to do. I should point out one other thing about Chicago before we get into this. Yesterday we learned of the passing of the great CTU former leader Karen Lewis, and the whole town today is in mourning. She was one of the real great labor leaders in this country, and she would have probably been mayor of Chicago had she not been stricken with brain cancer.
Yeah.
And so, I just want to, I think we all need to send our condolences to her family and her husband, John. We call him Coach. And we just had a well, anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. But
she was a wonderful person. In fact, we had her on the program. I think it was back in 2012. When we spoke to her.
Yeah, and I have had her on my show. We had a show in Chicago called Hitting Left with the Klonsky brothers, which we just put on hiatus during the pandemic, and she was a regular guest on there. But the only reason I bring that up now is that she led the union through through a strike back in 2012, and she was so charismatic and kind of a wonderful person. She had rallied the whole city, parents and community folks behind her, and that was a big reason why the union was able to achieve a victory here. I think the union won a victory here too, although I'm not sure that they think so. But anyway, it was at least a partial victory. A lot of the demands that the teachers were raising about reopening the schools, I think they got concessions on. And while it's not perfect, I think the teachers felt they passed the plan with 67.5% of the teachers who voted approving it. They thought it was good enough to go back to school on. And we've had a lot of parents who've been very anxious to get their kids back in school. Although that's complicated too, because there was also a lot who don't want their kids back. But the plan allows for choice among parents. Parents can opt to have their kids stay on, virtual learning plan, or bring their kids back into the classroom. A lot of parents have to get back to work, and have been unable to for almost a year now. And these are very hard economic times. And they need their kids back in the school every day so they can work. And others are also pointing out that their kids are suffering with online learning. It's not working for a lot of kids, especially children of color. And so there's a kind of a racial aspect to this thing too, on all ends of it.
Right.
And so it's a complex problem, and it's one that we're facing not just in Chicago, but in every city in the country. It looks like Pennsylvania, I see, and where you are.
Well, everyone's struggling with this. I guess the last question I've got for you, in looking at this, the question then becomes: is the Biden administration doing enough, and what more needs to be done? To get, because look, I think all of us want our kids to go back to school. I was looking at the New York Times article and the story that they did on when they opened up a phone line for mothers to call into and complain, so that they could vent. And some of the stuff that came out of that, I think people are ready to send their kids back to school and will value public school much more on into the future. So do you think the Biden administration is doing enough, and what more do you think they need to do?
Well, that's a great question, because up until now, the issues has been portrayed as a struggle between teachers and their unions on the one hand, and local school boards or the urban mayors on the other hand. But it seems to me that the problem cannot be resolved without a huge influx of money and resources. Maybe more than $1 trillion that's got to come from the federal government to retrofit schools, to deal with things like ventilation in the schools. We got these old school buildings that no matter what you do, I see in Philadelphia they're talking about window fans or something like that. It's going to be inadequate. You got to have tremendous change and radical thinking too in the way we design classrooms and group kids together. And teachers need to be trained in how to teach. This is like teaching in wartime. So I would say, I haven't seen what the Biden administration is going to do. They've promised things, but whether they can get that money through the Congress is another question. It's not just up to Biden. I think if it was, we would have those resources. We need money to. We need vaccines. We got to be able to vaccinate all the teachers and students and staff, and that's going to take a huge effort with federal help. And up until now, it's been left to the states and the cities. So yes, you're right. You're asking the right questions, and I think instead of spending so much time, dissing each other, the different groups within, and especially in our city, it's been very vitriolic and intense. We've got to turn to the feds and put pressure on them to bring the resources to the schools and the cities that we need to make this thing work.
Yeah, we got lots of work ahead of us, and we need to get to it. We need to get all the teachers vaccinated. We need to do the right thing. But I got to tell you, I don't know that window fans are the answer.
No.
In Chicago in the winter, Really? Window fans? That's the answer?
Yeah, well, here it was a matter of should they crack windows. Actually, they've done a pretty decent job here, but it's not in every school, and so once this agreement is inked and signed, which it has been, and the teachers start going back, you're going to have issues come up, and it's going to be up to the teachers' union, I think, to make sure that things get enforced.
Yep.
That promises get kept, because a big part of the problem has been a lack of trust. Even though the science is on the side of reopening, you still have to deal with the trust. If teachers don't trust the administration and don't trust that things that are promised will get done, then they're going to be reticent to risk their lives and their health by going back into the classroom and risking their family's health. So that's been the problem in a lot of places. But I thought the fact that 65 or 67 or 68% of the teachers voted to go back was a promising sign.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it plays out. But Mike, I appreciate the time.
Okay, Rick.
Great work as always. Thanks so much, man.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.
Good stuff. Mike Klonsky, education blogger. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1973. That was the day the worst industrial disaster in Staten Island took place. Staten Island housed the world's largest liquefied natural gas storage tank. The Texas Eastern Transmission Corporation owned the tank and operated a pipeline system that stretched from Texas to the East Coast. The tank measured 272 feet across and was as tall as an 11-story building. When leaks were suspected, the company had the tank emptied and shut down. Workers had been repairing the torn mylar insulation in the tank's liner for months. But then, vapors released during the repair process ignited the lining. This created extreme temperature and caused the pressure to rise, which resulted in an explosion inside the tank. The entire 6-inch thick concrete dome covering the tank immediately crumbled and rained down on the workers inside. 40 workers and 3 safety inspectors were inside at the time. None of them survived. The explosion caused a massive crater. Smoke billowed out for over 5 hours. Investigations revealed that nitrogen, Freon 11, and oxygen, and not liquefied gas, fueled the explosion. The cause was never determined. Some 25 years later, the New York Planning Board began reevaluating a moratorium on liquefied natural gas facilities in place since 1978. They concluded that government regulations and industry operating practices now in place would prevent a replication of this accident. The fire involved combustible construction materials and a tank design that are now prohibited. Although the exact causes may never be known, it is certain that liquefied natural gas was not involved in the accident, and the surrounding areas outside the facilities were not exposed to risk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'm going to tell you, and picking up on something that Mike said in the last segment, the fact that the teachers have a union to stand up for them is something really to celebrate, not something to attack them over. I spent a couple of days listening to the people over on Fake News or Fox News and all these right-wing outlets talking about, well, the teachers union, they're holding the country hostage, and just all of this anger towards these teachers who have the audacity to say, I would prefer not to get sick and die, please. And I know that's really radical of them to take a position that they don't want to get sick, that they don't want to die. I know that, again, very radical. But it got me to thinking again back to the conversation we had with Shaun Richman about the sense of community and doing out front organizing. And Karen Lewis was one of those people who engaged the community, who reached out to them and said, look, education is something for all of us. Education is something that we need for future generations, something that we need to make the country, the cities, to make our country the best it can be. And we all have a stake in it. And we want qualified teachers. We want highly paid teachers. We want empowered teachers. We want teachers who are going to practice their craft and cultivate young minds. We don't want factory workers who are stamping out little widgets. And it got his comment got me thinking about the fact that these teachers in Chicago have the ability to say, we're not going to go into dangerous conditions. We're not going to put ourselves and others at risk, is something we should be celebrating. For all of the freedom folks, all of the right-wing hacks who are my liberty and my freedom, the freedom to say, no, we're not going to do what we know is wrong is huge. I've been working on, some of this. I've been working with a union to talk about how to do, outreach to new members and to do messaging around labor issues. And I was thinking about a story that I remember when I first became a union member. And this was, years ago. I was working in a warehouse, and it was a Teamsters local there in Cleveland. And the warehouse had the warehouse workers, like I was, who were unionized, and the maintenance people weren't. And the maintenance people always had to do, stuff that you just go, really? Why would you do something that dangerous? Like having ladders that were, high ladders that were unsecured, and just crazy stuff, and that they were told to do. And I was telling the story of a time I remember, a supervisor had told one of the maintenance guys to take one of the 55-gallon drums of oil out and just dump it in the back, because the tow motors used oil. They were gasoline powered, and you had to change the oil, and this guy's job was changing the oil in all the tow motors and all the forklifts. And they would put it in a recovery drum, and they'd wait for somebody to come and pick it up. Well, evidently these people weren't coming, and they needed to change the oil. They needed somewhere to put it. So the supervisor made the executive decision to just take it out back and dump it. And the guy was going to do it because, it's his choice. You got two choices: do it or you're fired. He happened to mention it to a union guy who immediately went to the steward on the job and said, hey, do you hear what they're doing? The guy then went and questioned the supervisor and said, what are you thinking? And it was probably told, you mind your own business. This isn't union. He goes, no, this is my company. I'm empowered to make this company run better. This is our company just as much as it is yours. And this steward felt empowered in the mindset that we don't want the company to do something stupid because it could jeopardize all of our jobs. And I started thinking about, what kind of messaging comes out of that. Because ultimately, the maintenance guy, who was an at-will employee, could have been fired at any time for not following a direct work order, didn't dump the drum of oil out in the back. And in fact, the supervisor who made a big stink about doing it ended up getting fired because of it. Because when the union then filed grievance and did a whole bunch of things to bring that to light, the company was like, oh my gosh, you saved us a lot of headache. The EPA violations would have been huge. And it was because they did the right thing. And I talk about this when I talk about my having been in a union for as long as I have been. It gives me the power to do the right thing. It gives me the backing to do the right thing, that I know there's an organization that's going to fight for my right to do what's right. Because I say all the time, when I was driving a truck, if the brakes were out of adjustment, if I crawled under there and I looked, they were out of adjustment, I'm not driving it. If there are no upper marker lights, I'm not taking it. If it's mechanically not sound, I am not riding it down the road, because I'm not going to, I'm not going to kill myself. And two, I don't want to kill anybody else. And then 4, and 10, about 15th down the line is, I don't want the company to have to deal with an accident and what the costs would be and what it would do to the company. giving me the empowerment to do what's right. And I look what these teachers are doing in Chicago. They're doing what they believe is right. They're keeping themselves safe first. They're keeping their students safe. They're keeping their students' families safe. And yeah, this is tough. And they'll do anything and everything they can possibly do to educate those kids. And I've heard some heroic stories. People doing drive-bys to wave at kids to say, hey, I'm still here for you. They do their Zoom and they do their distance learning stuff, and everybody hates it. But we all got to get through it. So for me, that one little thing just jumped out at me. And I think it's something we've got to talk about as a society. The fact that collectively we can do the right thing. And we have to. I guess I think back to, I worked for a company that had this, they talked about the 110-100 rule. This was their corporate jargon. But it makes perfect sense. You do something right the first time, it costs you $1. You don't do it right and you've got to go back and do it again, it's going to cost you $10. If you don't do it right that time, down the road, it's going to cost you $100, and so on down the line. The longer you let something go, the longer you stay silent, the more costly it becomes. And, I take that into just about everything I do. The longer we stay silent about not forcing teachers back into classrooms, the more costly it comes if we do. The more we allow politicians to do the kind of things that Donald Trump has done, the more costly it's going to be. We should have stopped Donald Trump back in 2015. As a country, we should have repelled his rhetoric back then. And look what it's caused us. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Experts are saying that global warming may be to blame.
Rescue operations underway after massive glacier burst in India.
We don't know right now whether the breach originated from within the United States or outside the country.
Hacker tried to contaminate Florida City's drinking water. Plus,
we're going to crush those losers. Crush them!
GM's new all-electric Super Bowl ad.
I hope you will make it, Will. If you do, we can have a mackerel slap fight.
Gets hilarious pushback.
All of that hilarity and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Hello, America. Thanks for noticing us. We weren't even sure you knew we existed.
Oh, hello, Norway. You are who again? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, that GM electric vehicle Will Ferrell story is pretty funny, but first, some much less funny news, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. A hacker using remote access software gained access to the water treatment plant of the city of Oldsmar, Florida, near Tampa Bay on Friday. City officials said the hacker vastly increased levels of sodium hydroxide, commonly known as lye, in the city's drinking water. An operator saw the intrusion in real time and restored the chemical to safe levels. According to Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri, the public was never in danger.
Even if the plant operator had not quickly reversed the increased amount of sodium hydroxide, it would have taken between 24 and 36 hours for that water to hit the water supply system, and there are redundancies in place where the water had been checked before it was released.
An investigation is underway, but the incident underscores cybersecurity experts' copious warnings that the nation's aging critical infrastructure systems are in desperate need of upgrades, especially in underfunded local governments.
It's incredible to me that a hacker could essentially poison the water supply just with a few keystrokes on his computer.
Yep. In northern India, emergency rescue operations are underway after a massive piece of a Himalayan glacier broke off on Sunday, triggering an avalanche and a massive surge of water down a river that swept away 2 hydroelectric dams and several bridges. As we go to air, 26 are confirmed dead, hundreds are missing, and yes, scientists say man-made global warming likely played a role in destabilizing the glacier. A recent study confirmed the rate of Himalayan glacier melt has doubled since 2000. Scientists had also warned repeatedly that such large hydroelectric development projects were too dangerous for the already fragile region. And communities around the world face the growing threat of so-called outburst floods when glacier runoff builds up behind ice dams and mountain lakes. New research published just last week found evidence of a direct link between human-caused global warming and the growing risk of an outburst flood in the Andes Mountains of Peru. The researchers concluded with 99% certainty that the increased risk of these floods in Peru would effectively not exist without man-made global warming.
Of course.
Meanwhile, rough earnings announcements for the oil industry. Even before the pandemic crushed demand, the oil industry was already showing signs of weakening. Supermajors BP and Chevron announced last week that each lost more than $5 billion in revenue in 2020. The biggest, ExxonMobil, posted a loss of $20 billion in 2020, with revenue down more than 40%.
Well, boo-hoo.
And if Sunday's Super Bowl ads are any indication, it's not going to get better for big oil. General Motors kicked off its huge announcement last week that it's going all electric by 2035 with an expensive ad starring comedian Will Ferrell, who was not touting the environment or climate change, but the fact that the U.S. has fallen behind in the race to lead the global electric car market to more progressive countries like Norway.
Did you know that Norway sells way more electric cars per capita than the U.S.? Norway. We're gonna crush those losers. Crush them! Let's go, America.
Norway, where more than half of all new vehicles sold are electric, seemed pretty entertained by the ad. U.S. carmaker Ford hilariously clapped back with some digs, highlighting that unlike GM, Ford already sells EVs in Norway.
GM sells no EVs in Norway. Why would they bring that up and let Ford come in and say, yeah, well, you can come buy our electric Mustangs we sell there?
Georgetown University Business School professor Melissa Bradley told the Detroit Free Press, quote, "It's a hell of a move to go head-to-head with a country where you don't even sell what they're trying to buy."
Hilarious. I love it. I don't know if it's good for GM or if it's good for Ford, but I think it's good for us and for the planet and for EVs moving forward. Love it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide, even in Norway, on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So sad news today. It's like in the last couple of days, a lot of people have been dying. I mean, you know, the woman from the Supremes, now Larry Flynt. That's right, the Penthouse magazine guy, Larry Flynt, dead, age 78. I'll be honest, I thought he had died earlier. But, yeah, all right, there you go. It doesn't say what it was from. I don't believe, I mean, it was Hustler, not Penthouse. Just saw it in the article. I don't think it was from COVID, but we'll see. But speaking of COVID deaths, Ohio. Evidently, Ohio today decided that they were going to increase the number of deaths related to COVID by 25%. They're going to add, I guess, an additional, somewhere around 4,000 additional names to the COVID-19 death list. And I wonder what would happen if every state, you know, when that's going to happen, when every state now is going to go, yeah, we've been underreporting. And we're going to take a mulligan. I'm just wondering. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, what is it true? Is it another 0.25% higher? And will they come out with another increase? Well, I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us. I think somehow we lost Bob.
Hello?
Hey, Bob, there you are.
There you go. Okay.
Today has been one of those days where evidently somebody doesn't like me.
Well, me too. I had a very rough 4-hour day.
I guess that's what it is. And I want to get to your story. But first, evidently your state has increased the number of COVID deaths by a quarter.
Yeah, I miss a lot. Ohio Department of Health put out a note on the site, and it says that the death toll was underreported by as many as 4,000. They say these are the officials, or they, of the health department discovered it during routine employee training, and apparently it began last October and went on for months, which led to the underreporting. So they're going to update the numbers during next week to basically go back, Rick, and see if there are more or not. So the daily report looks really abnormally high for a few days, but they're going to then have to report the accurate amount of deaths in their dashboard because all of a sudden, boom, this was added within a day.
So, again, I get a bunch of people going, well, these aren't real COVID deaths. Like Herman Cain, he didn't die from COVID, he died from cancer. And you go, he had cancer, but it was COVID that did him in. Or I had one person tell me, well, someone had COVID and they died in a car crash and they still counted it. And I'm going, I don't know that that's true. Do we know that any of that kind of stuff is actually true?
We hear that. I don't know of documented, cases of it where someone died in a car crash and they put COVID. But there are cases, of course, where people had, obviously, let's pick this, for example, nursing homes where people have a lot of conditions. But let's go back to the regular flu, as I call it, regular flu. If, in fact, a person died of it and they had pre-existing conditions, they would list them, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, as dying of the flu. They listed it that way.
Right.
The flu was something that precipitated the problems that they had. They came forth and they died then from that final problem. So it's the same thing. It's just some people are debating, that the numbers are falsified because they're being paid, 13,000, a death or whatever. And none of that has ever been proven where anybody in a hospital said, mark it down so we can get 13K.
Right. It goes back to the question my lawyer friend asked me. He goes, if a guy's falling from the 20th floor of a building and you shoot him in the head and kill him, should you be tried for murder? And the answer is yes, because you killed him. Granted, He was going to die anyway when he goes splat on the sidewalk, but it was you who actually killed him. So it's the same kind of thing. It's the COVID that killed him. He's dying anyway. We're all dying anyway. It's just a matter of this is what took you out. How hard is that?
Correct. And then with these numbers, like, for example, in Ohio, they need to correct it because, people then, it creates a lot of people talking about, they're not being accurate, they're not telling the truth, but the health department discovered they had an error, and they corrected it, and they're adding it now.
Now, there are going to be those who are going to say this is purely political now because, during the Trump era, what they were doing is they were underreporting, and now they're finally coming clean. You're somebody I respect. Any of that in this?
No, I mean they've made a mistake, and especially with our governor, Mike DeWine, who has been a Republican. He's been a pretty straight shooter, obviously on this. In fact, he's gotten the wrath of many Republicans in this state for how he's handled COVID. But overall, he's gotten a lot of support, from people. So I don't think that they intentionally did anything on it. It's error.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the big story of the day. Obviously, the impeachment, Jamie Raskin and company breaking out some video footage. I got to tell you, I was surprised by the video footage that we saw at just how close that Romney was. I guess Swalwell said 53 feet, 53 steps away. I got to be honest, I was surprised at how close they were to actually grabbing some of our senators and representatives.
Right, and also the vice president. I mean, they were right outside the door. It shows the vice president and his family being taken out, and they had it was very well done. They had red dots and blue dots, representing the blue, representing the police, and then they had dots representing the rioters, and they showed them with the actual footage, but they showed how far apart those dots were. And in many cases, they were just obviously, right around the corner. I mean, literally, as you say, within feet of entrance where they could have went in and got them. And people in the chambers, of course, when the rioters went in, they had, weapons, they had different, handcuffs. I mean, they came there with the intent to get people. And, of course, they could have held them hostage, could have killed them, whatever in it. But even though, we knew how harrowing this was, how bad this was, once you see the video, you're like, wow. I mean, it's just horrific.
No, and this is where I come to this point where you look at someone like James Inhofe, who basically says, well, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing new for me. It hasn't changed my mind. You got Lindsey Graham saying the case is over. Josh Hawley with his feet up on the desk, twiddling his thumbs or doing whatever he was doing. I'm looking at these videos and I'm going, this is incredibly serious, because we were a couple of feet away from having our country overthrown, having elected officials murdered on the Capitol floor. I got to be honest, my mind just went to horrible places.
Oh, it did. I mean, I was imagining what they would have done had they gotten a hold of any of them. In particular, had they gotten a hold of, for example, of the Vice President or Speaker Pelosi. I mean, it would have been absolutely horrific. Who knows what on earth they would have done or how they would have done it. It was terrible. I think the worst, piece of evidence in a sense against the president, though, that they rolled out there, besides the videos and the horrific parts to him, was the tweet that was deleted by Twitter since then, where after the event, the president says, quote, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." And the other piece that everybody in that chamber knows, and I know, and anybody that has served there, and we talked about it on your show way before this happened, was the fact that the vice president could do nothing to change this election, but the president stood there in front of the crowds and said, Pence can do it. And he knew Pence absolutely couldn't do it, but he told the crowd, Pence can do it. And I think that in itself was absolutely bizarre.
And what the message for me is in this is, the fact that Trump riled these people up and pointed them at Pence is, for the Josh Hawleys of the world and the Langfords and even the Jim Jordans, is that they eventually will come for you too if you don't do what they tell you, what they say.
I mean, this all was bad enough, but just think about it for a second. This is what Republicans should think if we want to put this into party political terms. The president didn't say, let's march down there. Pelosi, can change. Let's march down there. Pence can change it. It was his vice president. It was his vice president that he was, taking the bus and rolling over and backwards over the vice president.
Yeah, it's crazy. And now you see people giving Mike Pence credit for not going along and trying to do some of the things that, as they pointed out during the evidence today, that, Trump calls Michigan and says, hey, I want you to, overturn the election. And you had two of the people sitting on that committee who tried. You see what's going on in Georgia. Hey, go find me 12,000 votes. Fortunately, they didn't, and they're now seeking, a criminal investigation. But this guy was really trying. To me, some accountability has to happen.
And yes, in Georgia, they've opened. One of the prosecutors has opened a case based on, what the president said and to whom he said it about trying to find votes.
So do you think that this, because I have I've got a lot of friends who are they quote unquote insiders, and they seem to think there's an outside shot that you're going to come around with 11 more Republicans to convict.
No.
I see no scenario possible for that to happen.
No, there's none, because the escape valve for anybody that was on the fence is the fact that this is occurring after Trump's out of office, and that is what they will absolutely latch on to say, look, horrific as it was, et cetera, he's out of office. And that's what they will utilize if they don't have another rationale for not impeaching.
But I do like, Jamie Raskin's. I do like his rationale in the fact that, look, you're telling us that in the last months of a presidency, because by the time we get to impeach him, he'll be out of office. He's just free to do whatever he wants. For me, it's about that accountability. Because look, I see the next Trump. I see someone like Josh Hawley, who, given this moment, if somehow he were to get a personality transplant and able to have some charisma, I think he would be worse than Trump down the road.
Well, I mean, you can look at Tom Cotton. Throw that name out there. And who, in my opinion, he's like John Bolton in the United States Senate. Cotton is. But I think that originally, and I know you had made a comment about this on the 25th Amendment. They were giving Pence 24 hours to invoke 25th. I just think originally this might have been an entirely different dynamic if it had been just done immediately, sent to the Senate, immediately. The whole dynamic of the day, because now we're seeing footage later on that in itself is horrific, and back at that moment would have been even more horrific when exposed.
No, I agree, and it's just one of those things that
right.
I think this hearing should go on longer. I think we should see more of these videos. I think we should be pulling in some of these people who have been arrested and let them make their defense of, hey, I came here for this purpose, because I think Raskin and the managers have done a good job of explaining that this is what they came there for. This wasn't just a rally to cheer on Trump. This was a rally to stop the electors from casting their ballots. That was the reason they came, and I can't get past any of that.
Right. I saw some, and I'm not about to make the statement I'm about to make because I served there, in the Capitol. But I have people I know that have posted, well, X amount of people died during the riots, and there was damage of $2 billion or whatever, and that I'm not disputing that is true or not.
And
around
I condemn
country,
that.
right?
I condemn that behavior.
But on top of it, there is a difference with the Capitol. It's all bad. I condemn all everything I just talked about, but there is a difference with the Capitol, because in that event with the Capitol, it was not setting fire to a store. It was an attempt to stop the government of the United States to do a coup, basically, of the legislative system, and it was targeted. So yes, there is. It's all bad. This is worse. Let me put it that way.
No, and there's
what they were attempting to do.
There's no comparing them.
Right.
There is no comparing them, because I'm sorry. Look, if you because I get this all the time. Well, Antifa. I go, Antifa didn't have the president of the United States directing them. I'm sorry, that did not happen. In this case, these white supremacist groups, they had the direct command from the commander-in-chief of this country, and these people, in their heart of hearts, believed we're saving the country for our president and for ourselves, because Trump himself said, if you don't do this, we're not going to have a country.
Right, and Pence can change it. Again, to me, the most solid piece in this is the fact of the statement that Pence could change this, which he knew was absolutely impossible, and he knew was absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But, people hear it. They hear it from the president. They think, well, he's telling us the truth. Pence can change this.
And here's the thing. I know a lot of, like I think I said this earlier, a lot of people are giving Pence credit for standing up in this moment and doing what is, mostly the right thing and or the right thing on the elector's side. Went through, certified, all of that. My problem is I don't know that Pence wouldn't have gone a different route if there were a path that conceivably on some outside shot they could have done it. As you said from the beginning, there was absolutely no chance of Pence doing anything under any circumstances, which is why I think he did what he did.
Well, and the one problem with Pence, if I remember correctly, the one statement, Rick, that he made was he studied this thoroughly. And he, I think he actually said it was studied or talked about thoroughly. There's nothing to discuss or talk about. It's impossible in any fashion or form, and you don't have to be a lawyer to know that he just presides. He can't alter.
Exactly. So last question I wanted to get into with you, because obviously this is going to go on for a couple more days, or at least tomorrow, Friday off because of the religious holiday, and then back into early next week. But your personal story, did you get the vaccine today? Did you get the shot or not?
Well, we had a really bad snowstorm here, and anyway, I signed up for it. I was getting up 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, trying to sign up. Finally, I got my appointment, which was for today. I had my confirmation, et cetera. Got in the car, drove 2 hours, got down there at 3:45 to Kroger Pharmacy, and I went in. There were 4 people on chairs because that's what the space allows to be held. I walked up, and the guy looked at me, the clerk, and he said, he's clicking and going through the computer, and he said, you don't have an appointment. And I said, oh, yes, I do. And he looked again. He said, no, you don't. I said, look here. And I showed him, and he took my cell phone, and he looked, Bob Ney, 4:15 appointment, Kroger, St. Clairsville, Ohio. So he looks at that, and then he's clicking again, and he said, well, there's a number. So I called my daughter, who had the screenshot for me, and she gave me the number, and I gave it to him, and he said, well, I'm not sure what happened. He said, but somebody else is there for 4:15, He said, you have to go back on the computer again. And I said, no, I won't. I said, no. I said, I try. No. And the pharmacist came over, took the information, the ID, and then he put me on for Monday. The pharmacist did. And because, I was stunned. Then I thought about something you said, and I repeated that to a couple people tonight. We're sitting there, the maximum, and I'm not against Kroger, grocery store, but the maximum they could take looking at that is 4 to 5 people an hour, right?
Yep.
So in a good day, 40 people? If we were in a gymnasium, could be shot after shot after shot. You sit down, all spaced on chairs, 200-300 people at a time?
Or better yet, even better yet, we just set up a street, you get in your car, you drive through, they jab you, you drive around the block they send you on a 15-minute drive and circle you right back. You
right.
Good?
And so I got in the car and drove 2 hours back through the snowstorm. But the other thing that amazed me is when he turned around and said, and had the proof I was there, that I was scheduled, and then he said, well, just go back on the computer. And that's when I said, no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so even with their help, it will be Monday.
Jeez.
And so, my story is not I was trying to get something special. I had an appointment. And I thought, how many people, is this happening to?
No, and that's the thing. We're making this way too difficult.
Forever. Yeah. What do you have to do to try to stay alive? and again, I really did, Rick. I set my alarm clock. In the past 3 or 4 days, I got up, all types in the morning, and it was just locked out or appointments weren't available. And finally, one popped up.
Jeez. I got to tell you, if you told me to go back on the computer, I go, the only time I'm picking up my computer is to hit you over the head with it.
Well, I was real nice, but I said, no. I said, you got to talk to somebody because I said, it'll be impossible. And I said, plus I had an appointment.
But wait a second. 2 hours? There's nothing closer? You're near the state capitol. How is it possible that there's nothing within 2 hours?
I literally surfed the portal for the Ohio Health. I surfed the county, Licking County, which is where I'm at. I surfed Belmont, where I'm from. I literally went through every Kroger from Delaware County, which would take me about an hour drive, all the way down to the Wheeling, West Virginia border, because I got to stay in Ohio. They don't allow you in West Virginia. And I surfed all of those, and that's where I got the appointment down there. And that's where I took it, and that's where I didn't get it down there.
It's just insane to me. You know,
and think of other people trying to go through that. Think of somebody sitting there, a certain age, trying to get on the computer and find that, and waking up at all hours of the morning trying to do it. And I mean, I went probably 2 days without any form of success, and finally got this.
It's way too difficult.
Oh, it's too difficult, right?
Look, I like the idea of having a drive up. Just.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, open the parkway or something. Open up something.
Well, and like I said, I saw 4 or 5 seats, and I'm thinking, okay, that's all they can do an hour. I mean, 50 people a day. But I like your statement, too, about the gymnasium. Open the gymnasium up. People come in, they could just give shot after shot. Everybody's spaced. You could easily space 100, 200 people in a gym. And, you could then inoculate, probably 1,000 people a day?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems
32?
insane to me.
It is. It's when I actually was part of it today, it was even more ridiculous once you physically see it.
Just crazy stuff. But I hope you get it on Monday.
We'll see.
I got my fingers crossed.
I've got a 2-hour drive again on Monday. We'll see.
All righty. Well, I wish you the luck, Bob. I appreciate
Thanks,
the time,
Rick.
man.
Okay, thanks.
Good stuff. No, I mean, seriously, it's crazy. It's crazy that it's this difficult. And again, I go back to what Trump was talking about, never did. We should be using the National Guard. We should be using the military to do this. You can hold a bayonet. You can hold a needle. It's not that difficult. And we should be setting it up in parking arenas. You just drive around the parking lot for 15 minutes or find a parking spot and sit there. You drive in, bang, they hit you with the shot, go park for 15 minutes. How hard is that? Crazy, crazy, crazy times. Which is why I'm hoping the Biden folks are. We're opening up the NFL stadiums. Maybe all this is coming. They've only been there a couple of days, but we got work to do and lots of it. Anyway, if you missed any of today's train wreck of a show, you can download the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com. We've had tons of technical nightmares. Tomorrow will be better, I promise. Just saying. If you got any thoughts, comments, questions, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Tell me how horrible today was, and I will agree with you. But again, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be better next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.